So today we move on from the last 2 weeks. We've been looking at what people knew awaited them. Now we're going on to what they profoundly hoped and prayed they would not wait them, i.e. hell. Hell is the place of torment reserved for those who have deliberately rejected Christ by choosing to commit sins and dying without repenting of them. The word hell actually has nothing to do with Christian tradition, but is taken from the Norse myths, where Hel, with one L, is the goddess of death and lives in a cold, dark, and miserable kingdom under the earth. Saxon missionaries adopted the term, but gave it a very, very different spin. Hell seems, at least in the days before Dante, to have been located over the seas and to the north and west. The life of St. Guthlac tells, horrible to relate, lo, the regions of the northern heavens seem to grow dark with gloomy mists and black clouds. For there could be seen coming from thence to meet them innumerable squadrons of foul spirits. Thus, with all their forces joined in one, they turned their way with immense uproar into thin air and bore the aforenamed servant of Christ, Guthlac, to the accursed jaws of hell. And this illustration from the role of St. Guthlac shows him being seized by a couple of fiends and carried off. And you can see the mouth of hell filled with demons and the spirits of clergy and one king opening up below him. The life of St. Brendan speaks of boiling northern sea and an island of flame and tormented howling, the confines of hell. And after its eruption of 1104, stories, probably spread deliberately through Europe by Cistercian monks, told that Hekla on Iceland was the gateway to hell. The Cistercian monk Herbert of Clairvaux wrote in his De Miraculis of 1180, the renowned fiery cauldron of Sicily, which men call hell's chimney, is affirmed to be like a small furnace compared to this enormous inferno. It was recorded that during the 1341 eruption, people saw large and small birds flying in the mountain's fire, which were taken to be souls. In the 16th century, Caspar Peucer wrote that the gates of hell could be found in the bottomless abyss of Hekla Fell. The belief that Hekla was the gate to hell persisted until the 19th century. However, the medieval visualization of this was usually the head of the monster Leviathan, breathing flames and gaping wide to swallow the damned, as here at St. Thomas's Church, Salisbury. The gates of hell are often shown as the jaws of this colossal creature, sometimes identified as Behemoth or Leviathan. This one is from the Harrowing of Hell painting at Pickering. Now in this page, from the Old English Hexateuch, dating from the second quarter of the 11th century, we see the open mouth of hell shown as a vast red serpent expanding to accommodate the fall of the rebel angels. This episode precedes the book of Genesis, before earth and heaven are made. And in this illustration from the Winchester Psalter of about 1225, hell's mouth is seen as a multiplicity of sets of jaws being locked in by an angel. But whichever perspective you look at this one, it's a huge entry, but there are at least two big jaws and a number of further smaller jaws, all making up the gateway to hell. This unfinished illumination from the 13th century Abingdon Apocalypse shows the devils having quite a job packing sinners into hell. I'm sorry, you're going to have to wait for a moment until my colleague can attend to you, is what the demon at the top seems to be saying. From the same manuscript comes this amazing hell mouth, complete with monsters and a group of souls peering hopefully out in the bottom left corner. I don't think there's an escape for them. This tympanum showing the harrowing of hell is a 12th century one on the north door of Beckford Church in Worcestershire. Beckford has two superb and very strange tympana from that period, one on either side of the church. Here you've got a fine hell mouth impaled by a much decorated cross held by the central Christ figure. And here, Death rides out of the jaws of hell on his pale horse. This is one of the roof bosses in Norwich Cathedral. So here death with hell following. It's the mouth of hell itself, rather than just a few demons. Here, a demon reaches out from the jaws of hell to try and grasp a courting couple. This is a 15th century carving in Rosslyn Chapel just outside Edinburgh. Now, on the west window of Fairford Church, hell is seen as a creature rather than as more usual as a city. Here we seem to see the whole of hell seen as the great beast. Souls are sucked in through the jaws, while another set of jaws threaten the onlooker. So souls are sucked in along there. Here, sinners are arriving at hell's mouth and the flames have already taken hold. This is from the Holcombe Bible picture book in the 14th century. The tradesman with his loaded weights, the dishonest alewife and the heretic arrive on the shoulders of their own personal demons, while other sinners arrive in a handcart. Bursting out of the jaws are the fires and the cooking pots ready for them. One demon supervises the cooking here, and another one here appears to be completely worn out, blowing up the flames with the bellows. He's just collapsed in a heap. And while we're on the subject of arriving at hell, I couldn't resist this wonderful image of nuns going to hell in a handcart. This is from the Roman d'Alexandre, a French manuscript of the 14th century. But they really are, it is a wonderful handcart. A cargo of the damned here are unloaded into the jaws of hell, while a demon sneaks away out of the picture with his own particular victim for a private game of torment. This is from another 14th century book of ours. And in this detail from The Last Judgment, painted by German artist Stefan Lochner in 1435, you've got no real jaws to hell, merely a hole and the demons dragging the damned into it. And once again, you can see awful lot of the damned are clergy. He descended into hell, so says the traditional English version of the Apostles' Creed. However, the original Greek and Latin texts refer to the depths or the dead, a paraphrase of Ephesians 4:9. This seems to be a reference to something akin to the Jewish Sheol, a place where the dead exist until the Messiah's arrival to judge them. Dante sees this as the first circle of hell, limbo, the place for those who had no chance to commit themselves to Christ. This is a Fra Angelico fresco of the harrowing of hell in St. Marco in Florence, painted about 1440. It seems close to the Norse idea of hell, showing it as a gloomy cave where demons lurk in the shadows, but are powerless to prevent the blessed from leaving. I particularly like the demon crushed under the door that Christ is standing, has knocked off its hinges. In Orthodox iconography, the resurrection itself is traditionally represented by the harrowing of hell, as Christ triumphant stands over the mouth of hell, trampling the shattered remains of its doors and leading the souls of the virtuous dead out of the captivity of the grave. This example is an 11th century Byzantine mosaic in the church and monastery of Hosios Lukos in Greece. And you can see all the bits of the doors scattered, including the key, and the doors themselves there, as he leads Adam and Eve out of the grave. This is the harrowing of hell shown in the 14th century Holcombe Bible picture book. Demonic watchmen sound the alarm from the tower, the battlements of hell. A demon cowers amid the ruins of the smashed doorway, and another looks up from his work in the furnace of hell, where he's boiling up the damned over the fires of Hellmouth. This place was seen as access like hell proper, through the gaping jaws of Hellmouth. Here is an enormous dragon. This is the wall painting at Pickering. There's a lot of debate as to whether those curious circles are original or whether they're a piece of Bowdlerizing by the Victorian restorers. I suspect the latter. In the 14th century book of ours, Adam and Eve are both dressed in shrouds, as is Christ, and as he rescues the blessed from the jaws of hell. And again, we have a devil watchman blowing an alarm. This little harrowing of hell is from the foot of the Bora cross, a miracle working cross of the mid 14th century in Norway. Satan falls to his knees down here as Christ helps the righteous out of the jaws of hell. It's a curious cross because the other three ends of the cross are all figures of the evangelists, but here, where we would expect to have seen St. Mark, I think it is, no, St. Luke, we have the harrowing of hell instead. We now move on to the 7 deadly sins. One's record was judged on the sin that, if unabsolved, would doom you to damnation. These are the 7 deadly sins: pride, lust, anger, avarice, gluttony, envy, and sloth, or sometimes despair. A 15th century French manuscript depicts the 7 deadly sins as prosperous gentlemen mounted on allegorical beasts. So Wrath stands astride his boar as he stabs his victim in the neck. Beside him, Avarice in his grey gown, he's not spending much on his clothes, weighed down by a heavy money purse, rides a camel leopard. Envy looks wistfully at his neighbour's splendid outfit, riding a hound carrying a large bone. Lust, in his glamorous green gown, rides an ape. In the foreground, Sloth, with his poorly tied hose and dropped hat, slouches on his donkey, while the portly glutton, clad in purple and cloth of gold, rides a cheery-looking bear which is eyeing up a joint of meat. Central to the picture is the king of sins, Pride, facing us head-on and mounted on a lion. And this is from a late 15th century manuscript of the Speculum Historiale. In the 15th century Dunois Ars, we have a similar, a more elegant set of sins. Here are pride and envy riding together. Sloth, or more likely acedia, depression, has really let himself go and is in danger of sliding off the tail of his donkey. Even the donkey looks gloomy. Anger is turned against the sinner himself as he stabs himself. And gluttony carries an elegant covered cup while his servant trails behind with the spare wine jugs. Lust cuts a remarkably fine figure on her goat, and if you look in the background, you can see David eyeing up Bathsheba in her bath. And Avarice and his servant are loaded with cash. But to move on to English churches, many of the representations of the 7 deadly sins show pride as the chief of the 7 sins, from which come the other 6, but probably none so graphically as this example at Raunds in Northamptonshire. Pride is shown as a well-dressed woman. She's pierced by a spear wielded by Death, and the other 6 sins emerge from her feet is a small hellmouth swallowing a sinner. Paintings here are absolutely spectacular. Most of the sins are quite hard to identify, but lust is very clear. Oops, sorry. Don't know why I did that. And the figure below seems to represent avarice, clutching an armful of coins. At Hesset in Suffolk, the sins are shown as a tree growing from the mouth of hell and watered by devils, and it bears dragons' heads as fruit. The leading bud is pride, below him are lust and anger, and then sloth and gluttony, then avarice and envy. They're really rather splendid. It's very difficult to photograph, though. In the southwest corner of St. Cadoc's Church in Llangcarfen are the remains of a spectacular painting of the 7 deadly sins from the 15th century. It's a slightly odd position to find them, and it's on 3 distinct surfaces, but its position is explained by discovering a 19th century photograph, which shows that the area was originally where the font stood, and the painting defined the baptistry area. And you do tend to find 7 deadly sins in close proximity to the font in quite a few of the examples. So here, sin is seen as a nest of dragons, with pride in the form of an extremely glamorous king, crowned by demons and wielding a huge scimitar-like sword. Next in importance are anger, where 2 men are held locked in a duel by a huge grinning devil, and Acedia, usually shown as Sloth, but here seen as Despair, who is helped by a toasting fork-wielding demon to commit suicide. Below, two demons drive a lustful couple into a forbidden embrace. On the west wall, we see Avarice at his counting table. It's a less conventional deadly sin, but perhaps deliberately making a point with 15th century parishioners, is somnolence. Here, a parishioner oversleeps on Sunday, despite the vigorous ringing of the church bell. His head clutching suggests that possibly gluttony may have caused this. And round the corner, we have Gluttony, bursting out of his clothes and being force-fed beer by another demon. Unusually, in Thornham in Norfolk, we have the remains of a series of bench ends. The guide defines them as sloth. I think that's pretty reasonable. Anger, maybe it is, but possibly it's despair. He seems suicidal to me. And drunkenness. I think that's a money bag and his avarice. But unfortunately, the rest of the series are missing, so it's more difficult to be certain about what these represent, except that they're definitely deadly sins. This striking capital from Vézelay shows lust with a protruding tongue, a goat's tail, and clutching a distinctly phallic fruit. While despair, an aspect of sloth, is portrayed as nourishing a serpent at her breast. And Acedia, despair, disconnection, here is depicted as a tragic-faced hybrid of man, duck, and bat, appearing to a clearly depressed man in the goat church in Sopron in Hungary. But it was such a strange image, that. Now then, devils and demons. And this little devil is a graffito on the wall of Beechamwell Church in Norfolk. It's post-medieval probably, but very, very graphic. This roof box at Southwark Cathedral, which was moved into the nave from its previous home in 1469, along with several others, when the original roof collapsed, shows the devil swallowing Judas Iscariot. In this mosaic rendering of Satan in the Last Judgment on the ceiling of the Florence Baptistry, dating from the 13th century, Satan is shown with horns, ears with snakes emerging from them, seated on a throne made of fire and snakes. And having all those extra snakes gives him even more mouths to consume the souls of the dead. In this image from the 14th century Lover's Breviary, the Prince of Devils sends his ministers out to do his work on earth. And here they go, temptations of lust, frivolity, and vanity. And here they encourage more frivolous feasting, so greed, vanity, all in one picture. And then at the bottom, war, so anger. This really splendidly cloven-hoofed bat-winged demon from Holberton is a relatively unusual motif for a roof boss, especially in the chancel. This is a Victorian roof, but he's really rather splendid. A very different demon, and probably more frightening to the modern eye, delights in the worship of the golden calf at Vézelay. The demons and sins in the Vézelay capitals are just, to me, horrendous. It's so different from anything else. The stained glass artists who worked at Fairford clearly loved showing devils. They come in all shapes and sizes, from relatively conventional ones, like these two chaps. Oh, I don't know why it's doing that. Sorry, my apologies. In the right-hand corner, and then the one below it, which is anything but conventional. A different selection of demons infest the wall painting of the 7 deadly sins at Llangcarfen, enforcing the sins on the sinner. The devil made me do it. Don't worry. Some images show demons at work in the contemporary world. At Melbourne in Derbyshire, a wall painting shows the demon Titivolus hovering over two women who are arguing over a round object and who each have a smaller demon on their backs. Titivolus was the name given to a specialist devil who encouraged gossip and malice, especially committed by women in church. In this book, image from the Lover's Breviary, a French book of the early 14th century, his lover stands by his bed as the devil hauls the soul of an adulterer out of his mouth, while his wife stands at the other side of the bed. I'm not quite sure, I seem to have got that in the wrong place, because here we go back to Titivolus. Titivolus again, this time at New College. Two women are seated in a pew. Standing behind them is a demon with bat's wings, eavesdropping. The left-hand supporter is a woman kneeling, a pair of crutches under her arms, telling her beads, while the right-hand supporter is a tonsured monk fast asleep. The message of this is clear. You need to spend your time in church praying, not either sleeping or gossiping. As well as supervising gossip, Titivolus is also known as the patron demon of scribes and writers. Here he can be seen attempting to dictate to a theologian. And on this capital at Vézelay, the devil, quite possibly Titivolus again, tempts St. Benedict by offering him a woman. This beautifully drawn demon is from the margin of the Sherborne Missal from about 1400. And he is inviting somebody to come and sin. But he is just so beautifully drawn. In another 14th century book of ours, we have a fine assortment of demons. Above, one demon with faces pointing in every direction transports sinners in a burning wheelbarrow to be welcomed by a remarkably cheery pair of demonic musicians to the torments of hell. Below, a hypocrite is bound and dragged off by a horned demon, while two bestial fiends carry off a pair of loose women. This cheery little demon leads a monk astray, causing him to attempt suicide. But mercifully, Our Lady comes to the monk's rescue, and the demon is routed. Clearly, when it comes to all-in wrestling, a demon is no match for the Blessed Virgin. Yet another soul is rescued. Whoop. And here's one of my favourite demons, a smart and savvy demon counting his ill-gotten goods, or possibly it's the church treasurer. This is a Victorian misericord in Old Malton, and I think it's just wonderful. I love the fact his money bags are all labelled in 100 poundses. Satan himself will deal face to face with people as the last days come. Satan and his army prepare to do battle at Armageddon in this roof boss at Norwich. But finally, Satan will be defeated. A very shame-faced devil sits in chains under a seat at Old Malton. We now move to the torments of hell. This is a detail from Jan van Eyck's Last Judgment, painted around 1440. The mural on the west wall of Childon Church dates from about 1170. The whole picture is in the form of a cross, formed by the ladder of salvation and the horizontal division between hell and the upper air. So at the top left, we see St. Michael weighing souls who are then escorted by an angel to the ladder. Some climb up to Christ, others tumble down the ladder into the underworld. At the other side of the ladder, we see the harrowing of hell, where Christ defeats Satan and releases the blessed from the underworld. Immediately below Christ is the start of the whole problem. We see the serpent in the branches of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. To the left of this, we see two devils holding up a spiked bridge, which dishonest tradesmen have to cross. First, the blacksmith, making a horseshoe without his anvil. Then the mason without a chisel, the spinners without a distaff, and a potter without a wheel. Below the bridge, the usurer is sitting in flames. He's blind, money pours from his mouth, and he has to count it all. He represents avarice. On his right, two figures represent envy, while on the left, two figures embrace lust. On the left-hand side of the ladder, The dead are boiled in a huge cauldron. The tympan at Conques gives us a graphic picture of hell on the right side of the arch. Pride falls from his horse. A priest and his concubine, standing for lust, face the gallows. A miser hangs strangled by the weight of his money bag. A blasphemer has his tongue torn out. While most representations of hell show agony, here the figures all seem to have the calm of despair. On the west front of Lincoln Cathedral, we catch a glimpse of some similarly graphic scenes of hell. The punishment of the sins of lust, sodomy, avarice, and perhaps pride are all portrayed. This is a modern copy or restoration of the original 12th century frieze, which is still undergoing major conservation work. And it's hoped that it may be able to be seen in the next three years or so. But it will be in a museum context rather than on the front of the cathedral. In the Salisbury Doom, there seems more humour about it all. Most of those being led off to hell are laughing and joking, though one man appears to have suddenly realised his error. We see the alewife, who's sold short measure, being lugged off by a very tiddly demon, while another leaps onto the archstones to make a speech. Meanwhile, we see the miser, with his purse round his neck, shielding his face from the flames, and the usurer with his heavy cash bags putting up a jolly good fight down the bottom. The 13th century Doomstone at York Minster shows an extremely busy hell, with a number of different mouths, all seizing sinners and admitting them to the torments of the damned. On the arcade in the Dean's Chapel at Worcester, we see demons set a sinner to roast on a spit in hell. There's often a mechanical element in medieval representations of hell. In the Duc de Berry's Tréligeur, we see a truly hellish landscape. The damned fall through the steam and smoke straight into the mouth of Satan, who reclines on an enormous grill over flames stoked by demons, wielding vast pairs of bellows. Through gaps in the sides of the surrounding mountains, we see souls in torment, peering out, while in the foreground, demons drag members of the clergy to the flames. Adulterers are lightly toasted over the flames of hell, while a usurer is choked on gold while being boiled. The heretic is spit roasted. The murderer is buried in red-hot sand and torn apart by dragons. The lustful are thrown into a burning lake. The prostitute is torn apart. Robbers become the victims of a demonic hunting party. The angry get consumed by hellfire. The covetous are force-fed silver, and gamblers play against each other with loaded dice. Hell here is seen by Fra Angelico in his painting of the Last Judgment. The highest level of hell is for the vainglorious fools. Below them, the despairing sit bound while demons torment them, and the gluttons are force-fed poison and snakes. Below them, the angry take great bites out of each other, and the envious compete for places in a boiling cauldron furthest from the demons and the fire. In the lowest hell, the greedy have molten metal poured down their throats, and the lustful are tied together and beaten. Central to the whole thing, Satan devours the proud, and they fall from his entrails into a cauldron of fire. Now, Dante's vision of hell gives us a far, far more complex and detailed account of what's in store for hardened sinners. It's all very organized, and start with those who are simply unbaptized, down to the 9th circle of hell containing the ultimate traitors. In this illustration from a 1370 Italian copy of Dante, Dante is greeted by Virgil and enters the gate of hell. Here they see the lukewarm, stung by insects, holding a banner, and are addressed by Chiron as he loads souls onto his boat to cross to hell proper. Here, Dante and Virgil see Minos judging a group of souls, and the souls of the lustful being blown away by the wind. In the Yates-Thompson Codex of the British Library, a Spanish product in the 1440s, we see the lustful being carried along by the wind, with Paolo and Francesca on the far right, talking to Virgil. Back to the Italian Dante. In the third circle of hell, they encounter the hellhound Cerberus, who tramples on the gluttonous. Virgil quietens the hound by throwing earth into his mouth. I looked at it, I thought, why is he throwing a ball for Cerberus to retrieve? But I then went to look up Dante and know he's throwing earth into its mouth. The second and third circles of hell are sketched by Botticelli in the late 15th century, full of activity. In the 7th century, they encounter the seventh circle, they encounter the sodomites, condemned to perpetual running among balls of flames. Though they don't look awfully energetic about it. But they will be consumed by the flame if they stand still. From here, Dante and Virgil encounter Geryon, a monster, to take them back down to the depths of nether hell. After traversing nether hell, they encounter the giants who surround the abyss itself, and one of them, Ephialtes, transports them down into the final depths. Here, they descend to the core of the world, where in a plain of ice, in which trap the souls of those who betrayed their rulers and masters, Satan stands, devouring the souls of the three ultimate traitors, Brutus and Cassius, traitors against the empire, and Judas, the traitor against God. They then make their way, escape from hell, climbing along Satan's lower limb until they find themselves by the river Lethe. A different vision of hell comes from the Les Visions du Chevalier Tondal, which was illuminated by Simon Marmion, a Flemish artist working in Valenciennes in about 1470. Here, the guardian angel shows the soul of the knight Tondal into the gates of hell, and they see Lucifer tormenting the souls of the damned. The hell of the Fairford West Window has an almost industrial quality, with souls apparently being fed into some kind of mincer. While in another window, we get a rather different, but still hellish glimpse of damnation as this soul peers out from the mountain rocks. This 13th century commentary on the apocalypse shows another mechanical element in hell, as sinners are literally broken on the wheel. And in the Hours of Catherine of Cleves, produced in Utrecht about 1440, is this truly horrifying vision of hell, which is seen as an industrial-grade furnace. A gaping lion's mouth opens its bat-like lips, tipped with talons, to reveal another red-hot mouth, into which demons cast an unending supply of damned souls. Above the furnace rises like a castle. It rises like a castle decorated with skulls. Burning towers heat cauldrons into which more mutilated souls are pitched, and a third mouth forms the domed roof. It's absolutely extraordinary. But I find it very interesting the way that hell is seen as mechanical in so many of these pictures, even down to the hand carts. No machinery seems to be of God. However, just as an afterthought, we move to purgatory. Just because you sinned, you may still escape the torments of hell. These are only for those who have not repented of their sins. Assuming that you have repented of your sins, your next destination is purgatory, a place where those who are not wholly bad or good are sent after death. While the wicked are condemned to hell and the holy raised to heaven, most faithful souls go to purgatory to be cleansed from their remaining sins and receive purification. This detail from the Coronation of the Virgin, an altarpiece by Guard Quarton, and was painted about 1450, shows souls tormented in the flames of purgatory. In this painting, the souls of men of all ranks, kings and commoners, laity and clergy, are depicted with their hands raised in prayer. They're plagued by devils, but also comforted by angels reaching down to console them. This further detail from the same altarpiece shows the real difference between purgatory and hell. To the left, an angel helps the purified soul of a pope to freedom, while to the left, a demon grabs a would-be escapee by the ankle and hauls him back to perpetual torment. It was believed that St. Patrick was led by God to a cave on Station Island in Lough Derg, which was the mouth of purgatory itself. The earliest written account of St. Patrick's purgatory was written in the 12th century. According to this account, those who engaged in fasting would be given a vision of, first, the torments inflicted by the wicked, and if they persevered in their faith, the joys of the blessed. Here a pilgrim enters the cave of St. Patrick's purgatory. This is from a 15th century history of St. Patrick's purgatory. The island is still a place of pilgrimage to this day, though the cave is long since filled in. And in this fresco by one of the Sienese school, located in the monastery of St. Francesco in Todi, Our Lady is redeeming souls from purgatory. But up at the top, you can see a pilgrim arriving at the entrance to purgatory, being shown the way by St. Patrick. So it's interesting that the rather local myth of St. Patrick's purgatory gets right down to the south of Italy. Dante's view of the world, as described by the Divina Commedia, written between 1308 and 1320, visualizes purgatory as a place on the earth, directly opposite Jerusalem, below which lies hell, and consisting of an island mountain reaching to the heavens. At its pinnacle is the earthly paradise, where the pre-fall innocence of man is restored. From there, the purified soul ascends through the heavens to paradise itself. Mount Purgatory, as described by Dante, is here painted by Domenico de Francesco in the nave of Florence Cathedral. Representations of purgatory are extremely rare in English churches, possibly as a result of the Reformation. It was one of the Catholic doctrines most disliked by the Reformers. In fact, the only example I've heard rumour of proved not to be, simply a fragment of a doom. It's far more common in books of hours, the volumes of personal devotions used by spiritually inclined nobles, and sometimes in missals. So here we've got a French book of hours and a German missal, both showing purgatory. The Tres Richard de Debray was painted somewhere between 1412 and 1416 by the Limbourg brothers. And here we see their representation of purgatory. And another book of hours about 50 years later, also French, but it's almost certainly based on the Limbourg brothers painting. Here we have a very different image of souls in purgatory from the hours of Catherine of Cleves, showing their torments being relieved by an angel feeding them with the alms given by their living friends and relatives. But the one thing you could be certain of about purgatory, it was transient. However much you suffered, it would come to an end, and the angels would bring you to paradise. The end.